Hello, and welcome to this episode of Tackling Your Taxes, which is a series presented by the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid that goes over important tax topics impacting low-income taxpayers and other taxpayers on a federal level as well as a Minnesota state level. So this time we're going to be talking about employee versus independent contractor. I'm just going to give a brief presentation today because the person who's going to join me was unable to right at this moment. And so not going to have a PowerPoint this time. We'll just reschedule this presentation for a more in-depth discussion later. But I just first wanted to talk about kind of that difference between an employee and independent contractor. And then I'll talk about some advantages and disadvantages of being classified as either. And then I'll talk a little bit about the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic and some of the services that we offer in relation to classification as an employee or independent contractor. And so when people hear about independent contractors, they often think of the gig economy, which and other like service-based positions. And so some of those examples are where you might earn income often through an app or website. Like if you drive a car for booked rides or deliveries, you rent out property or part of it, you run errands or complete tasks, you sell goods online, you provide creative or professional services, or provide other temporary on-demand or freelance work. And so those are just some examples of the types of positions that might be classified as independent contractors. There is a test for determining the difference between an independent contractor and an employee, and there are three main parts to that test. I'll just give a brief overview of them, and then we'll go more in depth the next time we go live about this topic. And so the first one is behavioral control. Does the company control or have the right to control what you do or how you do your job? And so those might be specific instructions that are given by the company, or that they have the opportunity to exercise that right to kind of dictate how you do your job. And then the second aspect is financial control. Does the business direct or control the financial and business aspects of the job? So those might be whether or not they reimburse business expenses, whether or not the worker invests in facilities or tools used in the performance of the job, things like that. So for example, a position that might be an independent contractor where they have the ability to set their own schedule. Perhaps they bring in their own clients and products. Perhaps they supply their own resources, laptops, technology, things like that, would be evidence of being an independent contractor versus an employee, where those where the company itself, classified as an employer, has more control over, perhaps they provide the clients, they dictate a schedule that a person has to follow. Perhaps they, check in and out each day. And that they reimburse for expenses related to the job, as well as providing equipment for doing the position. And the last one is the relationship of the parties. So is there a written contract, or are there benefits provided, such as insurance, vacation pay, or a pension plan? And so No one factor itself is controlling. It is a combination of that behavioral control, financial control, and the relationship of the parties. And so you look at a totality of the circumstances and the specific facts related to your case. And so something else I'd like to talk about is how it's important to be classified correctly. And there are specific tax implications related to being an employee and independent contractor. For example, um, independent contractors are able to take additional deductions on their tax return. And that is in large part because they not only pay the full tax on their wages, but they also pay a self employment tax. And so there is additional forms of taxation on independent contractor work because, for example, when an employee is paid, they often have withholdings. So they have taxes withheld from their pay already. Those withholdings are factored into their tax return, and they may or may not owe additional money at the end of the year when they file their taxes. And so when someone's an independent contractor, they're not having anything withheld generally from their wages, from their income. And so what happens is that they need to pay that full amount that is the employer portion and employee portion of taxes, and then doing the specific amount of self-employment tax. So generally, when you're an independent contractor, you want to make estimated payments on a quarterly basis to make sure that you don't get a surprise when you file your taxes for the following year for that tax year and end up owing more money than you anticipated. And there are actually specific penalties the IRS can impose if someone does not pay the appropriate amount of estimated taxes. So it is important to be aware of that. Independent contractors can take certain deductions for expenses. So, for example, if you were driving for a company, that provides services, and you're classified as an independent contractor under that gig economy example, then you would be able to, for instance, potentially take a deduction for mileage that is related specifically to the work that you did. And so you would be able to take that expense, whereas a employee, may not be able to based on the type of job that they hold. And so, something else I'd like to also talk about are there services that we offer at the tax clinic related to classification, is what it's called, of an employee versus independent contractor. So, if, for example, you're looking at those tests with behavioral control, financial control, relationship with the parties, and when you're independent contractor, you receive a 1099 versus a W-2 as an employee. So if, for example, in January of 2025, coming up here, you receive a 1099 and you expected to receive a W-2. What can happen is you could have been, if you believe you are an employee, not an independent contractor, you could have been what's called misclassified. And so, with that, you want to make sure that you are properly classified because, for example, you would owe potentially more in taxes, especially if you didn't have any withholdings or anything like that. And then you would have that additional self-employment tax. So you want to be aware of your classification and have it properly done for tax purposes. So there is an IRS form. It's called an SS8, and you fill it out. There are very specific questions getting at those three categories of control, and It helps you determine whether or not you were misclassified. And what happens is you submit that to the Internal Revenue Service, and the Internal Revenue Service will make a determination on your classification as an employee or independent contractor. Um, the company that you are working for does get notified of you filing an SS8 form. So that is something to consider as a factor of whether or not you want to fill out the form. If you happen to still be working for that company, or if it's a small community of employers. There's a lot of different factors that we can help someone go through to figure out if doing an SS8 form is right for them. It can take some time for the IRS to make a determination. And so you can file an SS8 form, and then, for example, you could see if you wanted to do an extension, for example, for filing your tax return, or you can get a determination, and later amend. Those are all, great options and questions to talk about for filing with a tax preparer. We at the LITC deal more with the legal consequences of misclassification and helping with that SS8 form. And so, just talking about the LITC in general, we offer assistance with IRS tax issues and Minnesota Department of Revenue state tax issues that are for the same tax year and issue as a federal issue. We do receive funding from the Internal Revenue Service in order to help low income and English as a second language taxpayers in their disputes with the IRS. And so if you happen to have any questions, if you happen to receive a notice from the IRS or go to file your tax return next filing season and you owe the IRS, or you have questions about your eligibility for certain credits and deductions, you can call our intake at 612-334-5970, and you will be linked to an intake specialist who will be able to ask you some questions, determine if it's an issue that we might be able to help with at the LATC, and then we'll be in contact with you, a staff member of the LATC, in order to gather some more information and determine next steps for your case. And so again, if you have any questions, if you believe that you might have a tax issue that you need assistance with, and for low income, we do 250% or less of the federal poverty guidelines for representation. But if you're not considered low income by that standard, we can still answer your questions and provide advice to anyone regardless of income throughout the entire state of Minnesota. And so again, if you need to contact our intake at MMLA, it's 612-334-5970. Thank you for watching this episode of Tackling Your Taxes. And the next episode will be in about 2 weeks. It'll be our last one for the 2024 year, which will be about gearing up for the tax filing season and things to keep in mind and get ready for as you get ready to file your 2024 taxes in 2025. And so you please look out for the Facebook and YouTube links to that video and topic. And if you happen to have any suggestions for any tackling your taxes topics for the following tax year, you can go to the MMLA website and look for information on contacting me there. So thank you and have a great day.